Great. So good day. My name is Hlib Vyshlinsky. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Economic Strategy. And before we move on to today's discussion topic, since the night was tough, especially for those living on the left, on the right bank of Kyiv, and today, 8 dead, many injured, let's start with a minute of silence. Thank you. During the moment of silence, I usually remember Alexei Kabatyuk, our colleague, an energy expert who died on the front defending Ukraine. And today there will be little focus on energy, actually. Although usually in the non-fulfillment of Ukrainian reform commitments, energy is involved because there are politically sensitive issues. But today energy will be represented exclusively by the specialized research center Dixie Group. Since this is an event technically organized by the Center for Economic Strategy, but in fact it is a joint project of 4 organizations. In fact, besides us, there is the Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, Dixie's, which I already mentioned, colleagues working in energy, the Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, our 4th partner. And we all work within the RRR4U consortium with the support of the International Renaissance Foundation, to whom we are very grateful. The topic of today's meeting, today's event, well, our communications team did their best. There's an alternative shortened version called Hard Times. Because we're in a bookstore today and the full version is more serious. How will the stalling of reforms affect international financing for Ukraine? Unfortunately, for the first time in the history of our project, we are forced to talk about the stalling of reforms. We debated for a long time among ourselves about how to correctly name what we are observing. Stop, rollback, delay. In the end, we settled on stalling. Now we will have, as always in this format, a meeting in 2 parts. In the first part, the consortium experts will present an overview of the situation and indeed why we are talking about stalling reforms. And then we will have a discussion with the participants of this process, whom I will introduce in the second part. And now please, Roman Nitsovic, Director of Research at Dixie Group. Please, Roman, take your seat. Alexandra Bitli, Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, Vitaly Nabok, Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, and our Max Samoylyuk, who got a spot with better face lighting than everyone else for photography purposes. And I will actually be moderating this. And actually, let's begin. We will start with Roman. Roman, your opening remarks, please.
Thank you, Hlib. Thank you, colleagues. Indeed, there will be less energy because a large part of the indicators has moved to the end of the year. 1-1. Yes. So I have to give a somewhat atypical political speech now.
to introduce in order to say.
But we are all people with cardboard signs.
Of course, yes. I even have an analogy of cardboard and paper here. So to provide a certain frame, a certain framework for the discussion, today's event is not typical. Because we are indeed talking about the slowing down of reforms. We are talking about the fact that the period of romantic relationships is long over for Ukraine and its leading partners. And not only are the tools of the carrot being remembered, but probably the stick is being applied. That is what is called negative conditionality. When penalties are applied for delays or failure to implement promised reforms within the planned timeframes. In this case, the International Monetary Fund is still more lenient, as it accommodates proposals to postpone certain structural benchmarks. Blogger, at the same time, the EU has already applied its method of partial payments, and for the first quarter we have already not received, meaning these funds are effectively lost for now. 1.4 billion euros. At risk are 1.27 billion, according to the indicators for the second quarter, because we should have already submitted the corresponding report to the European Commission, which was supposed to evaluate it and present it to the EU Council. So, well, yes, everyone is trying to figure out why this is happening, why it is occurring. And there is a lot of talk about the need to review and revise Ukraine's plan. As unpopular reforms are on the agenda, for example, lifting the moratorium on tariffs. Here, energy is present, and other indicators, problematic or potentially problematic, or those considered, let's say, considered problematic by our authorities. Colleagues will also speak about this. And finally, there are active discussions about the new International Monetary Fund program. We will touch on this too. But regardless of whether there will be a new program or not, whether there will be changes or not, this should not mislead or distract us. Because the main focus is this logic, money in exchange for reforms. This happens in many other processes, for example, in the process of European integration. If you violate certain democratic principles, for example, the issue of the independence of anti-corruption institutions, then in the expansion methodology, this can be grounds for halting the process.
Or it's, well, freezing.
And in fact, the issue here is not only about budgetary fiscal sustainability, which is critically important, especially when we have defense expenditures already planned, plus 400 billion, right? For the defense sector, even more than 400. This issue is very acute, but it's also about the overall political course of the country. In this context, the next slide. Yes, we still need to somehow return to the agenda. These two quotes illustrate that this agenda is a bit different. At least as of last week, let me make a small disclaimer. As of last week, there were somewhat polar positions on issues of fighting corruption and the status of the respective institutions. We see this from the quotes. The Prime Minister and the quote from the President of the European Commission. I would very much like us to discuss today how we can overcome the differences in these views and come to some solutions, because our position is not just to criticize, but to propose something. Thank you.
Alexander Oberek, thank you, Roman. Let's start with what our monitoring showed regarding the implementation of the IMF program. somehow, historically, we put it first because we always looked at the IMF first. Now, it seems to me we need to, like with currencies, switch from the dollar to the euro, shift to prioritizing obligations to the European Union, but that's just a comment from me. But the IMF is a key institution that evaluates the quality of our economic policy, essentially for the entire group of 7, which supports us particularly through the ERA mechanism. So, Sasha, please, what did we have with the IMF?
So we have Nika traditionally, I don't quite agree right away for the International Monetary Fund, but for the
Alexander Oberek, it would be strange if you didn't agree with him.
Sofia Vyshlinsky, Nanema, Potama, Taswatan. In order to forget about the IMF and start with the EU needs to change its approaches to financing. The EU still gives us support if we have an active IMF program, and as far as I know, this hasn't changed and has always existed. So why do we need the IMF? It's basically what has been said, because it's precisely the program around which a coalition of those who support us is built and aid is gathered. That is, not only does Ukraine ask for money, but the IMF essentially acts as our advocate. Although, in principle, we mentioned last time that the IMF Executive Board made a decision on the 8th review. Again, this happened partly thanks to and partly despite, thanks to the fact that we fulfilled the 2 benchmarks related specifically to the implementation. Public investment management reform. This is a very large reform that will take a long time to implement and requires coordination efforts from everyone. But during the review, a few vulnerable changes occurred. It was actually proposed, but one can say that it has already been approved, to combine the 9th and 10th program reviews. That is, if it was previously planned, meaning they planned that the 9th review would be based on the results of August, and the next one in December. Now we will have one joint review. This will be in December. They will evaluate the performance indicators that need to be met by the end of September. And it is important to note that this is logical because the draft law on the state budget is submitted in September. This is a document that the IMF analyzes thoroughly, which is very important for understanding our budget situation and funding for the next year. The trend clearly will be cumulative. It will be 1.1 billion SDR. In fact, once again, we are doing the 8th review. We always recall the times when Ukraine couldn't even pass the 4th review of the program. But the International Monetary Fund changed its approach to financing Ukraine. The various indicators and structural benchmarks are postponed. For example, this time 4 benchmarks were postponed. This helps Ukraine to still fulfill these factors. Unfortunately, some of these benchmarks are quite easy, but they are postponed because, again, we cannot accomplish something. For example, the same audit of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, it had to be done by the end of September, then by the end of April. Finally, we did it. Why couldn't it be done on time? Well, it's a mystery to me because it's quite an easy benchmark. It doesn't even require passing laws. 4 new benchmarks were added. And unfortunately, what the IMF does every time, the order of structural benchmarks has changed. So if you are used to having your structural benchmark as the 50th, now it is not the 50th, it might be the 35th. And the order changes significantly, so we are, as it's called, unlearning how we name the benchmarks. And this map basically now serves to show that we fulfill some of the benchmarks even after review, still with a delay, meaning a later calendar. Part of it, we are not fulfilling currently its 2 benchmarks, that is in the fiscal sector, financial, and one more on anti-corruption. So we are further postponing. I will now move to the slide that, let's then go with the new benchmarks. What was added? One milestone was added by the end of August, which we need to achieve. This is again about the public investment management reform. It is once again a very important reform. It is aimed at promoting the creation of a comprehensive integrated public investment system. Because right now we had a very fragmented system. No one understood how money was allocated, what the priorities in the state were. A lot has been done. I highly encourage you to download the presentation on the RWR4U website. And why? Because there we detail each indicator, what has been done, what needs to be done, and where we have some problems. And 3 benchmarks are very important with different deadlines. These are benchmarks aimed at reforming the financial sector, because everyone understands that we need to prepare now for the period when there will be reconstruction recovery. And reconstruction recovery without private capital will be impossible. Therefore, we need to reform the financial market. If we talk about those milestones that were postponed, then again we have the appointment of the head of the State Customs Service. This is something that, in principle, many people in Ukraine know that the head of the State Customs Service was not appointed on time. This should have already been done. Instead, it was initially added, meaning a prior action in the program for adopting the customs reform program. And here the key issue is that this plan was adopted. So in fact, what we have to do, it was not published, but the IMF credited it to us. And we see this from the IMF's decision to give us the program, because without implementing this plan, without its approval, we would not have the program for the 8th review. But for now, this document is secret, meaning no one has seen it. We don't know what is written there. But the appointment of the head of customs was postponed until the end of December. We have problems with all the benchmarks related to the National Commission on Securities and Stock Market. That is, once again, we have postponed something. Now the independent audit, the strategy, again, has not yet been approved, although it was supposed to be approved back in winter. And one of the energy benchmarks is the completion of the publication of the external assessment results of the National Commission for State Regulation of Energy and Public Utilities. Again, I don't see a problem. Why couldn't this be done on time? For the next period, we will have quite a few benchmarks for the 9th review. We have enough time to complete this by December, but we want it done on time by the end of September, because all these benchmarks have a deadline in September. That is, there will be the appointment of the head of the Bureau of Economic Security. We were supposed to have done this already. Again, we have not done it yet. We are waiting for the government's decision on the appointment of the one who, well, that is on the decision of the first what was done. Lozovi's amendments are something that was postponed several times. They have not been cancelled again. But we held discussions in February. And I want to note that the business perspective on this, on the repeal of these amendments, is very ambiguous. That is, businesses do not really support the repeal of these amendments. The process of selecting appointments for members of state enterprises and so on. And it's important to note here that now everything I think you have seen in the news is about the possibility of a new program. I wouldn't say this is a betrayal. This is explained by several factual reasons. One of the reasons is that each program has a goal. And the goal of this program is to prepare Ukraine for recovery. When each time we see the IMF macro forecast, they postpone when the war will end. We understand that we need to change the program. And it has to be different now, with different policies, with different measures, and most importantly, with different funding. Because as of next year, and actually for the year 2027, we have to pay the International Monetary Fund more money than we receive in net terms. Clearly, this is not a sustainable model for Ukraine. Therefore, once again, the forecast needs to be changed. And again, from what we see in the IMF forecast, the forecast for the state budget deficit is very unrealistic. We won't be able to reduce it like that because we still need to finance the army, social services, salaries, and so on. Therefore, reviewing the program is basically a normal process. The main thing is to do it right from the start, and the main thing now is to continue fulfilling the structural benchmark so that the IMF trusts us and doesn't say that we are not fulfilling something, which is why we want to review the program.
Alexander Kokul. Thank you very much, Sasha. And now we move on to this large block, the Ukraine Facility or Ukraine Plan. Vitaly Nabok, Institute of Analytics and Advocacy. Vitaly, what do we have with the Ukraine Plan?
Vitaly Sashko. So, colleagues, good day to everyone. Glad to see you all. Happy to talk about these meaningful things. And today I would like to start actually with a retrospective, let's say, a retrospective look at what happened in the past. I would like to start with such a significant event for Ukraine. This is URC 2025, where, among other news, in fact, the president of the European Commission announced that Ukraine will receive another tranche of external support from the European Union for meeting the indicators of Ukraine's plan. This will be the fourth regular tranche. It amounts to 3.1 billion euros. However, as you might have seen from press releases and communiques, it was not actually mentioned anywhere at that time that the amount the EU will pay us is actually a partial amount of the tranche. That is, behind this amount, behind these 3-point-something billion, there is a significant problem, which at the time when the government submitted the report on the fulfillment of indicators for the first quarter of 2025, involved the non-fulfillment of 3 indicators. And actually looking ahead, I want to say that these indicators were about the reform of ARMA, about, in fact, increasing the staff numbers and strengthening, in fact, the High Anti-Corruption Court, and finally, about the reform of the territorial organization of the executive power. And again, looking ahead, I would like to say that on the right side, where the indicators are currently unmet, you will not see that ARMA, however, this indicator was fulfilled by us literally in the last days before this presentation. That is, this reform law came into effect on July 30th, and we hope that the government will include it in the next quarterly report when submitting this report to the European Commission as one of the fulfilled indicators. Now, however, when we talk about the tranche, this money is currently held until the next report and the corresponding conclusion by the European Commission. Moreover, we talked about the fact that these indicators, along with others that we will have in the second quarter, are problematic. The situation with them developed differently for each, which I will also explain. And there were, though accordingly, certain reactions from the government. On June 25th, during the regular meeting of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, a protocol decision was made to improve, in fact, the stimulation and responsibility for fulfilling the indicators of Ukraine's plan, and I think it was 3 components. The first component was to identify those responsible for implementing Ukraine's plan for each of the indicators, meaning those individuals who will be at the level of central executive authorities, ministries in particular, responsible for actively promoting the implementation of various indicators and their support. In the legislative work within the walls of the Verkhovna Rada, we can state that this part of the protocol decision was indeed fulfilled, meaning all central executive authorities submitted proposals and candidates to the cabinet. However, it is worth noting that this happened during the time when the old composition of the cabinet was in effect, and currently we cannot say with certainty or clarity whether the same responsible persons can be involved. For example, there was a deputy of one ministry, but now in the new cabinet he heads a completely different ministry. He cannot actually be the executor and responsible for advancing this indicator in its implementation. And the second part was to obligate all those responsible, those working on the indicators, to fulfill them by the 15th of July as much as possible, those indicators that we owed according to obligations. And here I must say that this part of the decision was not implemented at all, because those indicators that were owed in the past remained owed even after the 15th of July. Finally, the third and last component of this protocol decision is that those responsible should, in theory, be held accountable for their own non-fulfillment of certain indicators. However, at present, the public, like us, does not have such information that any of these responsible individuals have been held accountable for non-fulfillment or untimely preparation for execution within the established time frame. And in fact, taking into account the unmet indicators of the first and second quarters, the total of that debt, the total of what we are potentially missing out on, and what is now in question for us is funding in the amount of 2.1 billion euros, which is quite a substantial sum. For a country that is in the third year of a full-scale war, for a country from which, in fact, over 7 million people have left Ukraine, yes, in which there are existing structural macro-financial problems, and we accordingly cannot neglect any opportunity, particularly in receiving funding on time and fulfilling our obligations. And I emphasize that these commitments are primarily needed not by international partners. They are not needed by the European Union or any other institutions. They are primarily needed by the Ukrainian people, Ukrainian citizens. In fact, they are the ultimate beneficiaries of all those reforms that are included both in the IMF program and in the country's plan. And therefore, Mr. Tushak, before I must say that this should be approached responsibly. So, I would like to move to the right part of the slide. What went wrong and with which indicators are there problems? First of all, I would like to mention indicator 4.3. It concerns the increase in the staffing of the High Anti-Corruption Court. A fairly common story in the media, as I have encountered, is that the media highlight this indicator, yes, when they write about the High Anti-Corruption Court, only in the part that we need to increase the number of judges in the High Anti-Corruption Court. And this is partially true, as there is such a need. It is in particular established by a number of independent assessments, and even the Accounting Chamber of Ukraine mentioned this in its audit. However, there is also an obligation to increase the staff of the court apparatus so that these judges have the opportunity and authority to properly ensure the support of the execution and consideration of those decisions, those judicial processes that are ongoing in the High Anti-Corruption Court. And here, in fact, the implementation of the indicator began back in November 2023, specifically with the determination of the competition by the High Qualification Commission of Judges of Ukraine. However, due to the expiration of the powers of the then composition of the Public Council of International Experts, the competition did not take place for a long time. When the Verkhovna Rada renewed the powers of the then composition of the Public Council, the competition began. This was in April 2024, and it actually progressed until autumn. But due to reasons that were extremely challenging, certain tasks for those participants who actually applied for the competition. This is a qualification assessment. Only 2 people completed it, whom the High Qualification Commission of Judges recommended for appointment to positions in the High Anti-Corruption Court. And of course, we actually received this decision almost at the end of the year 24. The situation with what to do next with this competition is unclear, and in fact later in the Verkhovna Rada there was an initiative to legislatively adjust, looking at the results of the competition at that time, certain conditions of passage, and in fact the characteristics of the exams offered to candidates. And such a step was taken. It is indeed aimed at facilitating this competition procedure, and currently this law was voted on in June. At the beginning of June, it was signed by the President of Ukraine, and at the same time, the High Qualification Commission of Judges re-announced the competition. Currently, it is ongoing, meaning the recruitment of candidates is continuing. It will last until the 7th of August. As of now, according to the latest data, over 40 candidates have applied for the competition. So far, it is not the colossal number we had during the first recruitment. However, there are still certain hopes that the competition will take place. It will take place, in fact, with a positive decision, and we will finally be able to close this indicator.
Alexander Kots. Vitaly, please, I understand that each point has its own detective story, but we are running a bit behind schedule.
Vitaly Koval. All right, then literally a word from each.
Reform of the territorial organization of executive power. Here we currently have a situation of discussion between the associations of local self-government and indeed parliamentarians regarding the provisions on the Unified State Register of Local Self-Government Acts. And currently this draft law is being prepared for consideration in the second reading. Regarding the indicators of the second quarter, it is worth paying attention to the changes in the review of legislation concerning judges' declarations and the verification of their integrity. Here, work is also underway in Parliament regarding the bill we have, which is also being prepared for the second reading and aims to change approaches, specifically to increase the time for the possibility of checking these judges' declarations. The next is the reform of the digitalization of enforcement proceedings. As you may know, last year Ukrainians accumulated over 2 trillion in debts on enforcement proceedings. However, the amount of recoveries is only approximately 1%. And actually, the digitalization reform is supposed to help speed up, automate all processes, and streamline the collection process. And here, similarly, legislative work continues on the relevant draft law 9363 in the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And the reform of the professional education system is perhaps, I would say, the only indicator that we could have basically completed on time. But we failed because the draft law was basically agreed upon at the level of the Verkhovna Rada. And here, in fact, only the final actions remain on it. And lastly, it's the launch of transparent international terms, tenders for production sharing agreements. This concerns critical minerals, specifically theirs, their sale, particularly through international competitions. And here too, in the final stage, since the Cabinet of Ministers has already formed both the list of those critical minerals to be put up for sale and certain areas where they are to be extracted, and in fact the final deadlines for that as well, in order to have this competition announced. However, in total, we still have non-fulfillment. We have non-fulfillment in both the first and second quarters. The third quarter, in fact, prepares for us no less, let's say, joyful or let's say sad prospects, since from all those indicators that you can see, currently none are completed, and therefore the work will continue, and we must understand that everything is still ahead of us, so we must stay focused and indeed not lose vigilance and monitor and continue to engage in this. Thank you.
Thank you for the picture. Roman, I see that you will have a lot of work with the fourth quarter results to see what's happening. And now I hand over to my colleague. I'll give you mine. You can take this one.
And to Maxim Samoluk, actually, our special analysis to how this situation will affect, how this non-fulfillment will impact Ukraine's external financing during the war.
Yes, thank you. Just so you know, we have 130 slides in the full presentation, so we could close the doors and go through each one with you. But let's try to briefly summarize now to move on to the discussion. Actually, I'll try to set some general framework and explain why we are talking about this at all. At the Center for Economic Strategy, we recently gathered leading non-governmental analysts to provide their forecasts for the year 2026, the main economic forecasts. What you see here on the screen is one of the results of this forecast. This is the forecast for covering budget needs. The red bar is our need. This is on average about $54 billion, and the green bar is what we have from foreign financing to cover it. It is clear that in previous years not all foreign aid fully covered this. We usually finance debt repayment from our own funds, but next year we have an especially threatening situation. We have no less than 13 billion in funding shortfall from what we plan. Accordingly, any delay or loss of funding, especially in such conditions, must be understood as a weakening of our positions in the war of attrition. We are waging a war of attrition, and the fact that we are now forced to talk about losing $1 billion here, planning to lose $1 billion there, is completely unacceptable. If we look at the dynamics, every one of our monitoring reports, we provide statistics on what we are fulfilling late, and what we are not fulfilling. Noticeable non-fulfillment of Ukraine's own obligations began only this year. In 23 and 24, we talked about some technical problems. We fulfilled some things late, some with delays, but we fulfilled them. Now, for the first time, we have a situation where the European Union has cancelled part of the funding, or rather postponed part of the funding for Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund is traditionally loyal to us. It counts either the beacons that are not fulfilled on time, or
traditionally during the war,
but this has been going on for how many years now? Yes, but now we have a situation of full-scale war. Yes, sorry. Now we have a situation where our failure to meet conditions is affecting this loyalty, and we might lose it. And the International Monetary Fund has every right to demand that we fulfill the obligations we have taken upon ourselves. Moreover, the European Union, under the conditions of the Ukraine facility, can demand the return of already paid funds and, for example, deduct them from future tranches if Ukraine rolls back reforms that we promised to implement, have implemented, and then decided that we do not need them. And in general, the story that literally happened within a week with Bill 12,414 completely undermined trust in Ukraine. Donors may become more scrutinizing, and these yellow squares, they can also turn into a very bad story for us if we continue to fulfill or not fulfill the obligation indicators at all. What are the consequences? Short term, this is what we talked about. It is the potential loss of more than 2 billion euros in funding from the European Union. We have already said that this is exactly how much the unfulfilled Ukraine facility indicators will cost. We can still fulfill them within the next 12 months after receiving a negative assessment, but time will be lost, resources will be lost, and this resource is vital for us. Moreover, any future cooperation with the International Monetary Fund, including within any potential future cooperation program, if we want to change the financing conditions or change the forecast under which funds are allocated to us, will be more difficult. The long-term consequences are the slowing down of accession to the European Union. We ourselves have given our opponents the cards to criticize us. We will need to convince more countries to support us. Access to new financing programs may become more difficult, and this needs to be understood now. Ukraine, of course, must fully and timely fulfill its obligations. It seems to me that every speaker mentioned this today. We talk about this during every monitoring. We also mentioned that those formally responsible for the implementation or non-implementation of benchmarks and indicators are clearly defined. But in my personal view, failure to implement affects the whole society, so everyone should be involved. We should not point fingers saying the Verkhovna Rada is to blame here or the government is to blame there. We are all actually to blame because it is in our common interest. Moreover, if earlier delays in the 23rd and 24th year with fulfilling our obligations mostly arose due to some technical incapacity or some technical delays, now there is a risk that Ukraine may have lost the political will to implement reforms altogether. And for me personally, this issue, we see now that there are not only technical problems, there are also those that are important. Для нас самих гальмуються з тих чи інших причин, не виконуються, і треба дуже обережними бути з цим і розуміти, що реформи потрібні нам самим, ми повинні їх виконувати. Дякую.
Дякую, Максиме, дякую, колеги. Переходимо, власне, до частини дискусії. Зараз я додам один стілець. В мене таке буде трохи очевидне рішення. Що? Все в порядку? Ні, не треба, я постою. Я буду стояти. Ага, окей. Отже, тоді всі народні депутати у нас будуть з цієї сторони. Власне, уже приєднався Андрій Мотовиловець. Андрій Мотовиловець, дякую Андрію, що зміг взяти участь. Андрій є, крім того, що народний депутат, власне, перший заступник голови депутатської фракції політичної партії «Слуга народу». В термінології британського парламенту я б роль Андрія назвав Chief Whip, власне, тому ми Андрія і запросили. Я не знаю, як це можна перекласти українською, але це людина, яка забезпечує, власне, голосування більшості за ті законопроекти, які є принципово важливими для української влади. Іванна Климпуш-Tsintsadze. Да, жодним чином. Остання активна візуальна роль – це навпаки блокування трибуни. Іванна є народною депутаткою від Європейської солідарності, але для нас зараз ви найбільш важливі як, власне, голова комітету з питань європейської інтеграції Верховної Ради. Ярослав Зhelezniak. Що? Ярослав Zhelezniak запізнюється на 10 хвилин, тоді ми його і представимо, коли він прийде. Але, власне, Ярослав є... Ладно, представлю зараз і так. В принципі, Ярослава всі знають. Народний депутат від партії «Голос», перший заступник голови комітету з питань фінансів, податкової та митної політики. Не знаю, чи існує ще зараз ця міжфракційна група за співпрацю з міжнародними фінансовими організаціями, але Ярослав був в ній. Напевно, не існує. Але в будь-якому разі Ярослав цими питаннями активно переймається. А тепер, власне, для Ярослава ми залишимо частину в цій парламентській частині, а тепер, власне, аполітична частина сьогоднішніх учасників. Henrik Huitfeldt, Henrik Huitfeldt є керівником відділу державного фінансування, підтримки бізнесу та соціальної політики представництва Європейського Союзу в Україні. Власне, Хенрік сьогодні представляє Європейський Союз як того великого донора, який є принципово важливим, але не тільки донора, а, власне, інституцію, до членства в якій Україна прагне. Юлія Шаїпова. Юлію, прошу. Юлія є старшою проєктною менеджеркою команди підтримки реформ Мінекономіки. На перший погляд виглядає такою неочевидною людиною, яка б тут представляла уряд, але насправді Юля допомагає координувати міністерство, власне, виконання наших зобов'язань. Як не дивно, я не знаю, як Юлі це вдається, але і по плану України, і по якійсь частині секторів розділів в законодавстві ЄС, які ми маємо адаптувати. І, власне, Дмитро Шульга. Дмитре, прошу. Дмитро є директором програми «Європа і світ» Міжнародного фонду відродження, але Дмитро тут представляє не фонд відродження як донора нашого проєкту, тим більше, що цей проєкт іде не по програмі «Європа і світ» Міжнародного фонду відродження, а, власне, як один з найбільш досвідчених аналітиків, власне, по європейській інтеграції, тому що, як ви бачили в останньому слайді в презентації Максима, ми будемо говорити сьогодні і про короткострокові наслідки, і про довгострокові наслідки від того гальмування, про яке ми говорили. На жаль, сьогодні у нас немає представників від МВФ Світового банку, попали ми вже так на початок відпускного періоду, і з цим було трохи важче. Але тут ніколи не зрозумієш питання у відпустках чи в політичному небажанні сказати про позицію, яка може бути або невідома. Отже, почнемо ми з такої більш м'якої аполітичної частини, перш ніж перейдемо до політичних, справедливих абсолютно в цій ситуації баталій. Власне, першому я б хотів би дати слово Хенріку, як людині, яка, власне, представляє наших партнерів, які допомагають нам у війні проти нас на виснаження. Я так трошки підправлю Макса, бо з твого виступу до кінця було незрозуміло, хто проти кого з агресією пішов. Тобто, звісно, проти нас пішли з агресією. Тому, власне, Henrik, what is European Union's opinion on the situation we have now? We can speak both about like short-term things, like these delays that were presented in the presentation, that were shown in the presentation, but also like maybe some systematic issues that could be worrisome for both European Union and for us.
Thanks a lot, Jussi. So this is working. You're hearing me? Yes, yes. Good to know. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm happy to see you all here also after a very bad night, one of many recently. So it's also very sad to be here in these circumstances. So I will be I think probably less political than you would hope me to be, but there have been official statements from Brussels now on the recent situation. So please look at them. But let's come back now here on discussion on the implementation of the Ukraine facility plan. So I think in general I think we see impressive overall reform progress. I think the Ukraine plan is a very ambitious economic growth plan, and there are significant progress made in implementing this plan, both for economic growth situation of Ukraine, but also to move ahead with the EU accession process. I think that's the overall line in general. But of course, there were, not least last week, serious concerns on what happened on anti-corruption institutions, and you have seen from tweets of hierarchy in Brussels today saying that they're happy that the key safeguards of anti-corruption institutions have been restored, but there are still reforms in this area. Rule of law, anti-corruption needs to continue because it's a challenging area, and of course also it's visible when you see on which indicators that has been delayed within the Ukraine plan. So, but first, like on the basics, so yes, there will be a little bit repetition of what was said earlier, but the Ukraine plan, or the budget support within the framework of the Ukraine facility in support implementation of the Ukraine plan is approximately 38 billion over 4 years, but it's heavily front-loaded, as you see. So already with the last payment in March this year, more than half of the overall 38 billion has been paid, so something like 19.6 billion has already been paid. And currently the payment for Q1, that was the payment request was sent a little bit late in June and has been assessed by the Commission and sent to Council. So the assessment is going on within the Council. But if the payment request sent by the Ukraine government was of 3 billion out of 4.5 billion. So if that payment will go ahead as we hope later in August, following approval by the European Council, then we will have more than 23 billion that has been paid out of 38. So it's a significant part, so which will have an impact, as you're saying, on the financing gap for coming years, of course. As was saying, that there are these 3 laws that were, or 3 indicators in Q1 that was not fulfilled. The ARMA law has now been promulgated by the president, so that can be paid later, because they are, as was said, like the Ukraine has 12 months after the quarter to fulfill the indicators, and then that will come in subsequent payments. So there will be an additional then around 600 million move to next payment for Q2, and hopefully we can also see some progress on the other 2 indicators that is pending, that was described there, especially on the high anti-corruption court, and also on the decentralization law, and acknowledging that it's a complicated political process. So that's for Q1. On the may say some words on the partial payment methodology in general. So I think I'm not sure that the numbers that we showed here is correct. So maybe we can double check with Yulia or with others. But so the logic of the partial payment methodology is that you have an overall tranche amount that was for the first quarter, it was 4.5 billion, and it's divided by the number of indicators, which was 16 indicators, and then you double the amount for laws. So that means that's why the ARMA law costs 600 million, etc. So for the Q2 payment, so the overall amount, or the ambition level, if that is lower, there's only 11 indicators, and the overall amount is 2 billion minus this. So it means that the one law will cost approximately 200 million. So it's a little bit probably less than what was shown here on the field. So, and then my last point will be on this also, because as you were saying, there are challenges going forward on some indicators. There are probably delays in some other things as well, including introduction of the IT system for the justice sector, etc., which will not be possible to fulfill in the time perspective that's allowed. So there are ongoing discussion on the overall review of the plan that is foreseen in the Ukraine facility regulation, and the hope is that we should have this review of the plan approved by the European Council before the payment request is sent for the third quarter this year. So that means that the indicators for the third quarters forward might be a little bit different, because there are some changes. Yulia probably can go in more detail on what is being discussed, but the overall message is that the overall value of the plan should stay the same. So if some things are delayed, some other indicators need to be anticipated, and there are also some efficiency done to make sure that investment indicators, which is a significant part of the plan, so around 6 billion, I think, will be used as effectively as possible. And I think I will, on the investment indicators, which is also impact you see concretely on the ground when I'm traveling the country, you see significant infrastructure investments taking place throughout the country. We're in Zaporizhia last month and saw the underground school there that was also funded directly from the Ukraine facility. So I will stop here, but also happy to answer some questions coming through.
Yeah, maybe one additional question, like to your initial remarks. If to summarize current EU opinion on Ukrainian performance within Ukraine facility in the first year and a half of its existence, do you think that do the Union think that it's time to somehow revise like the plan for the further period, or it is needed to just come with some message to the Ukrainian government on improving performance, and that these delays that we see are not like really proven like by some rational, clear technical reasons?
Like this, the Ukraine plan is a commitment taken by the Ukrainian government, so of course we would like to see it implemented according to the deadline that are there, but it's also a new process, and I think it's a learning process on both sides. We have now the Commission proposal for the budget for the new multi-annual financial framework for 28-35, and it's clear that this will be the main methodology used for payments of EU program, both inside and outside the EU. So it's important that Ukraine is developing a system that are able to implement these kind of programs going forward as well. So I think this is what the learning process we're having right now is doing that, and the review of the reform of the plan is making it more realistic going forward. But that said, of course, there are areas where we would like to see reforms move quicker. So, but that is clear. But I think overall, taking everything together, I think given the very difficult circumstances that Ukraine is in, I think we can see that the overall progress has been quite impressive. So.
Thank you. Alexander Kotan, thank you. Now, actually, the second part of our technical section. Actually, I will ask Yulia a question. Actually, if we calculate like this, Max and I did an internal inventory before the event today, who is responsible for what. And actually, among what was missed or not completed on time regarding facilities, actually, there is only one government decision. All other decisions were made by the Verkhovna Rada, or the Rada even made them on time, but the president signed them late. But with all this, indeed, there was this directive from the Prime Minister, and this issue was raised by the Minister of Finance, because in the end, yes, the government has to communicate with the European Commission about what we are or are not fulfilling. Actually, what happened? What do you think happened? Why did such a deterioration occur, which is not on the board, as they say? And what steps are being taken now, particularly technical ones, during the coordination process by the government to prevent, to get the situation back on track for implementation? Because the situation, the plan for the next 2 quarters is very ambitious. There's a lot there, and it's not all green. Let's start with that.
Anastasia Felibe. I am Felibe. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to see everyone. Your question, yes, can be summarized very briefly as who is to blame and what to do. Let's take a step back for general context, what we have already managed to do, and look at 2024 before we look at 25. In the year 2024, we managed to complete 36 indicators. None were overdue. All were fully completed. The European Commission was satisfied with the progress, the content of the adopted acts, and the decisions made. And in fact, we are very proud of this result because it is quite typical for Ukraine. Some were there, slightly moving deadlines. Some were slightly deviating from the previously discussed content. In the year 2024, we went through everything without such things. And this is, in fact, a matter of pride for our team. In the year 2025, indeed, to be honest, everything slightly deviated from the planned schedule.
Why did it happen like that?
In general, the steps of the year 25 are quite complex. Even if we look at those laws or non-legislative steps that were not completed, they are quite complex and comprehensive. For example, if we look at the step regarding the selection of judges for the High Anti-Corruption Court, there was such a coincidence of circumstances that did not allow us to complete this step, although Ukraine fulfilled its obligations. That is, it was a procedure developed jointly with European partners. The competition was announced on time. All stages of the High Qualification Commission of Judges selection process were conducted on time. We had enough candidates. Over 230 candidates applied for 25 positions for which we needed to appoint judges. But only 2 reached the end of this competition. Was it too difficult a competition, or maybe not all worthy candidates managed to submit their applications? Well, it's hard to say, and I don't want to speculate. But it's more about the fact that it's not like Ukraine, for example, sabotaged something. Yes, we did everything we could for this step. It was also mentioned that we have 12 months to complete it, and in principle the competitions for judges were re-announced. They are ongoing. A bill has also been registered in the Verkhovna Rada, which aims to improve the conditions of the competitions and allow us to recruit the necessary number of judges. And in this way we will fulfill this step. The President signed it recently. Also, if we talk about the law on decentralization, number 13,150 from the first quarter, it is quite extensive. It sparked a lot of discussions, including among the non-governmental sector. That is, there was a very active position from the Association of Cities, and the complexity of implementing this step as such was involved.
As for Alexander Kotanu, I see that Andrii has comments, but Andrii, actually your speech will be right after Yulia. You will be able to respond to everything regarding all legislative matters.
Yulia Fedorova, yes, regarding the steps of the second quarter.
And quarter about professional education, about the integrity of the judges. They are ready for the second reading, but Andrii will be able to elaborate on this. We did hope, we had high hopes for the August session, but I'm not sure.
And speaking about what to do, Henrik already mentioned the change of plan. Truly, there are Ukraine facility plans. They're being prepared. And what's important here, Henrik mentioned that the scopes of funding not change. Maybe it's a good clarification from European side, but it's important for us to know that the size of our obligation would not be any different. So that we need to be responsible with all the commitments we have taken. Reforms, we're not stepping back from our reform. No, we are actually moving forward because in some points we are even moving forward, even making a couple of steps forward. So some of the things are changed, directives are being prescribed, or they are changing like one step is divided into 2 sub-steps. So as the national coordinator, we will try to highlight all the risks, but it's important to understand that Ministry of Economy, by certain steps, it is the executor, but we fulfill the function of umbrella. and we work with other competent authorities. On our part, we try to operatively highlight and to convey the message to Verkhovna Rada and government, and we hope that after amendments that will be made, that will be approved quite soon, we hope that our progress will be renewed and the speed of implementation will be renewed, and we will move forward in a better trend than it was before. One clarification: by the results, Prime Minister, the situation we have mentioned, were there any procedural changes that will enable, that will be the hindrance through the work? For example, when not Ministry of Economy, not the government, they are not executors of the commitments. So was there anything that was the subject of the change? This is the difficulty, complexity of the coordination of the plan. Not all authorities that are responsible for the indicators, they're not in the subordination of the government. For example, VAX, government does not have any authority over them. But this is the issue of the interagency coordination and building of ties and connections and understanding of what Max mentioned during the first panel. This is the joint work, and we are responsible all together for the results. And when ministry is preparing the draft of law, it leads it to the moment when it's being entered into Verkhovna Rada. And Verkhovna Rada plays an important role in the refinement of this. So it's important for all stakeholders to understand what an important work we're all doing. Thank you, Julia. Andrii already has the microphone. And the first question is what we have seen on plan of Ukraine, all but one step. These are laws. Yes, this is the vocational education organization of the territorial communities organization, and I think that's all. And one decision of the Cabinet of Ministers. Julia mentioned that laws were difficult and there were discussions around them. On the other hand, I can say that a year and a half passed. In a year and a half, they could have been adopted already. Why we failed to adopt them? So why I'm so interested what colleagues mentioned, Vitaly mentioned, law on vocational education. In all other indicators, we could find political moments, but not here. Why? Can you? Do you have the microphone? Because we have simultaneous interpretation. I will try with my speech. I want to apologize because I led the country into political crisis, and we made one step to come out. But thank you so much for the presentation that I've seen before this. It's wonderful. I will ask you to share the contacts and materials, help my team to communicate and understand, because it's very difficult to collect this information which is on the slides. This is the slide. I always show it to the prime minister who was there and who is right now. Yes, all the red indicators. This is something that we could not fulfill. This will not be fulfilled. I understand what reading we are on, where there is no even registration, and we need to understand what is my function is. I'm responsible for the Verkhovna Rada. Practically all the commitments are being taken on the government, which communicates in a weird way with us about what communications, what commitment to take. Sometimes I find out this information not from them, but from presentation of experts, from what I've heard from IMF. Because I don't know all the information. I'm sorry. This is also a big surprise. I absolutely agree with you about audit of judges. What happened on judges, I remember this very well. I remember the first reading. I remember the committee that said this will not work. This will not be able. We will not be able to implement. I remember how European Commission brought to us the summary, and I came and said, "Look, war accepted." And they said, Andrii, this will not work. They gave me tests. I tried to pass the test. I didn't pass the test. I gave it to the son. He never passed it. Nobody passed the test. We accepted it. We broke the committee. What does it mean? They are good experts. And they said it will not work. This is not possible. And now we see the result. Yeah, they were right. 2 people, well, those were not fools who came to the competition. There were many wonderful people, and this is not the issue of our dialogue. This is the issue of our dialogue. I will say that further, I will not make this law. Of course, the commitment came from EU to fulfill. It's impossible, and we don't know. We don't know how to build discussion in the committee because what EU is requiring from us, it's not possible to fulfill. What they're asking from us on the revision of declarations, we have letters, we are writing letters, why and how this will work. This law will be adopted with many problems, but it will be adopted. This law will be adopted because there was the block related to ombudsman. We will skip it. It's not related, but yes, it will be adopted. This will be adopted. Here we're waiting for the second reading, and this implementation was blocked by Tymoshenko. This is the small law. I don't even I even remember how many amendments are made on each of the law. What about digitalization? It was blocked by Tymoshenko. Is it blocked for good? It's very difficult to communicate because when you come to the professional discussion, you come to Yulia Volodymyryevna, you say, what a number of amendment you don't like, what's the problem? He says, Andrii, you understand, military will take everything. And you say, in what point? And she says, in all. And you say, it's not true. This is a cool law. And if your accounts are arrested, without decision of the executor, you cannot unblock it. And this law has to do it automatically. But the discussion when Yulia Volodymyryevna, it's not just her, but experts as well, and they say, there are things that are written. Moreover, there are members of the team, there are lawyers who are sitting like this during the meeting. They're very ashamed. But I am blocked, but I think I will be unblocked. But I don't need voices. What's the peculiarity? The law in the first reading, I can come anyway. There are amendments in the second reading. I have the schedule of work. For example, I will be in the meeting and I will be listening to all the amendments. There will be a lot of them. It's a special procedure and they are here everywhere in every law. Yes, so this is my chart and I carry it with me. And I always ask, why do I need this function? I love Sobolev, he's my friend. I want to help him. Nobody designated this function to me. What work is working on this? This is Dasha, my assistant. She has a salary. I have one assistant. I don't have another assistant. 45,000. No, I am giving 10,000 for the pension fund. So 55,000. I don't see those 10,000 hryvnia. Also, I have a very talented designer. She works a lot. I have analysts who work with me in the team. And also in the government, there is part of the team and I always have the dissonance with the government because I come to the meeting on commitments and there are 100 people and I have only prime minister and I don't know all who these people are. This is strange. I had different approaches and tools. For example, I told to Sergei Marchenko, I said, there is minister 13150 that was supposed to be adopted a long time ago. Minister agrees. I suggested to block any payments. Reconstruction, friend, there is no personal responsibility. This is very incredible. So, to quickly publish the chart and receive information of the election, of the voting, you know, members of parliament, I cannot, I need to persuade them. I can be responsible for my faction, for the numbers of votes, and I can talk to other factions. But prior to this, it was much easier to do the commitments because there were not so many discussions. Why we have this problem? When you see that they had it, the policy returned back to the Verkhovna Rada. That's why this discussion is quite strange. Politics is working how? I received a mandate from you to present you in Verkhovna Rada. I'm not fulfilling the program. I understand what state my country is in. War is always poverty. The fact that we don't feel it, that's a miracle because we receive financial assistance. Nobody can just give it for free. We need to fulfill the conditions. And agenda consists of these laws. And I'm not coming and nobody coming just for no reason. I want to be helpful in Verkhovna Rada, and I see that there is a blockade and it's very difficult. Can it change? I think give me some time by the end of the year and you'll see the difference. But we are coming to the end of the political season, and Verkhovna Rada is not working well. Political season, what do you mean? Political season starts. My competence ended long time ago, and members of parliament want to go. They don't want to work, and they're saying, "When will this all be over?" Unfortunately, very often in the council, I hear Andrii, Ukraine facility is not working, and this discussion. You will all not be able to change Yulia Volodymyryevna because she doesn't think it's feasible. And pensioner will never connect financing with Ukraine facility with the social payment that he or she receives. We work a lot, but it doesn't depend on Julia. I understand that there is a manipulation. No. Responsible is not Ministry of Economy. No, this is Kuleba. This is Ministry of Justice. This is Ministry of Education. This is Kuleba. This is Ministry of Reconstruction. This is Ministry of Justice. This is Office of President. This is Ministry of Finance. This is State Service. This is Ministry of Economics. Here are two laws. Where's the next one? No, this is Ministry of Agricultural Policy. We combined it, so Alexei is responsible for that yet. This is Ministry of Energy. This is Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Energy. This is Ministry of Veterans. This law was always blocked. At each meeting, they promised me to show the law. This is the third quarter, so no words. Tell her in the personal note that I'm waiting for the law. To who? To Kalmykova? Yes. Tell her. Okay, I will write to the deputy. Yes, nobody saw him. and this is your ministry, and you did not agree on the second chart because there were some indicators that changed. The government now treats differently to the program. I was very surprised when I met with a new prime minister. She showed to me people who work in her apparatus. I don't even know these people. I know Sobolev, I know Yulia, but others I don't know. And probably I'm happy that we have changed government. I have hope for the new impulse. And Andrei, the last political question. Now we would come through facility, plan of Ukraine, but we still have a very politically charged question. If we don't see the news by the end of the day, then we will not be hear the news on the appointment of the Bureau of Economic Security. And before appointment, the future prime minister, she said that she intentionally voted against, and government voted against appointment. So in this way, they have taken political responsibility prior to the voting in order not to appoint the head. And the party of majority voted for that, and they have supported this idea. What position are you talking about? That Ukraine will not fulfill this condition on the appointment of the head of a Bureau of Economic Security by the 30th of July. Yes. You supported. I will explain. Verkhovna Rada made a decision when it signed, when it adopted the law on Bureau of Economic Security. Good, bad, it's a debatable issue. But 226 appeared. President signed. And when I spoke, I said I am responsible for policy. At the committee, you cannot change. Minister has to carry the political responsibility. I'm talking about the answer of Yulia Sverdenko before appointment. She gave this answer from which came out that she does not have intention to appoint the chair, and you still chose her as a prime minister. Okay, I will reformulate. What is the position of the political party servant of the nation and the faction that you present in this situation? And does the government today, there are still 6 hours left. No, in 6 hours it will not appoint. I know that there will be a powerful movement on customs, on the competition in customs and in Bureau of Economic Security. When I read the law, I had many big questions for this law, but I cannot change the path.
After the appointment, the government will not be in the position to fire this. But yes, there is some information, but I cannot disclose it. I talked to the people I worked with. They work in special exporters, and when I mentioned that truth examination, they said that they undergo it every month, and they were really impressed that the person at that position refused to undergo a polygraph. As for the Russian passport, my stepfather had a Russian passport, but then he changed it to the Ukrainian one. There are some risks, there is some fear, and yes, we do not like the security service of Ukraine, of course. So I am not saying about the cases when they are blowing up something in Russia, but why can I just appoint one person? What about 2 or 3 people? And this is not about the fact that Ukraine is very proud, but we voted in favor of that law. If I were Yulia Sviridenko, I would require to remove that grief, and then I would request the Verkhovna Rada to make amendments to the law. You know, we need to disclose information, and I would have done the same as the Prime Minister. Yes, back then there were signatures of the Minister of Finance, Prime Minister, and they took the responsibility to uphold the law. That is just my comment. Yes, but we need to have a full picture. Now I think it's impossible, and that's my position. All right, it would be great to talk to Yaroslav. You know, we are to be done at 17:30. I can leave you at 17:40 tops. Then we will take this blog about the long-term impact on your integration. You know, I just want to take this opportunity. No. Yes, we are, you know, running late, so I suggest that we proceed further. I'm grateful to Andrii for his position. So, Ivanna, what kind of impact would it have? Sorry, Hlib, for insisting on taking the floor. It's a pity that Andrii left. Could you just stay here for a little bit? No, I'm not about this. You know, you said that the officials bear no responsibility for the commitments they took and all that. Yes, I'm on that with you, but if you are saying that there are no responsibilities, that is why there is a question. Why do you not require the reports when for example, about the appointments of these appointments of ministers? Everyone will keep their position. You know, you cannot blame others when you have never used the tools regarding the accountability of the government to the parliament. But you know, that's true, because sometimes they make such promises that you understand that some things can be explained, can be justified, and this will benefit all of us. But as for Euro integration, I will not dive into figures. I'm grateful to all the experts for your tremendous work, for dissecting all of this. But on the very first slide, there was something. If there is a hint of kickback, like corrupt deal, 12,414, it wasn't a hit. It was a signal, you know, recognizing that it was the backsliding in the reform. And you know, everyone was trying to explain that the risks it posed were really sizable. So that is why I think that we have to call things with their names. Because, you know, there were a lot of different things behind the scenes, this or that way. Since 2022, we tried to solve it. In 2023, we started speaking out about that, and then our partners joined. But in 2025, anyway, the government of the country decided that despite of the financial dependency on our partners, we can just ignore their position, their stance, just dismiss their support and do what our imagination, dictates to us in order to save and to help some of our friends. I believe that there are some things that are already obvious, and for example, Ursula von der Leyen and the spokesperson of the European Commission have mentioned that some things have been amended, but we know that there are still prosecutors that are appointed just arbitrarily. And I think that we have to pay very careful attention to the fulfillment of every indicator. We will not, get away with this tables, slogans. No, we need to do more transformative work. Secondly, I believe that there is another big risk apart from the challenges that the Euro integration process, and we know who is responsible for the first part. Yes, Orban, he was to blame until the 22nd of July. Our government provided the argument to Russians, to all the enemies of Ukraine, that Ukraine is a really corrupt country that does not have the right to join the European Union. And all of those friends that were rooting for us currently, now they are not only under the pressure of their media and their society, they will not be taking any initiatives to boost the first cluster for Ukraine. Can I just ask, judging from your communication with our European friends, can we consider the societal protest smoothed the perception of Ukraine, and that not everything is a lost cause? No, it has been a failure. But the behavior of Ukrainian society, signals about a lot of things, and this will ensure, further aid provided to our country. So our society is sacrificing their lives, they are shedding blood, and we are also fighting for those principles that were also fought for in 2014. I also wanted to mention that we have to expect the EU law on expansion under scrutiny. There will be updates on what has been done over time, and today the new vice premier had a meeting regarding the sixth cluster, but I assume that in 2023 it was written after the martial law is lifted. Ukraine has back to the pluralism in media in 2024. It said we strongly recommend to get back to the pluralism in media even during martial law. And and this will be related to everything. There will be very clear indicators of what we will have to change. We will have to modify this document that will help to fulfill the commitments. And it is very important. I will just word my opinion. So we will see the delayed euro integration. We already received the advanced payments, but our government, for some reasons, decided that we will continue this way because this is in the interest of our country. And the most important thing that I wanted to mention, the government of our country, our president, did his best so that trust garnered, trust for Ukraine was just, broken. And of course, it raises questions about the investments into the defense sector, about the allocation of additional funds. It also raises the questions about the manipulation of the public opinion in different countries, and the pro-Russian, people will be providing all these arguments, and it will be very hard to restore that trust. Our government needs to understand that those golden toilets, or that no one will finance their wealth. And we need to understand that we have to work for the benefit of our country. For now, I see only this, that there are some gaps which reflect that our government did not really acknowledge the cliff that we were standing on. Ivanna expressed the opinion of the political opposition, but I would like you to be that person who you are, a person who has a good sense of what is happening. Andrii was really exhausted, but on the other side, he promised that by the end of the year, the situation will be settled. So what is your vision, starting from technical aspects, whether the Verkhovna Rada will manage to settle the matter, and whether you can see that they acknowledge the situation? I mean, the one that Andrii apologized for, whether the government understands that we need to get back on track. I will be very brief. No. Andrii mentioned that the government will not make a decision, and tomorrow there will be no decision, and on Monday no decision. Let me explain. I will just turn off the opposition part. Could you just please put your microphone closer? So that is my job, and I'm the co-chair of the group Druzhba. Yulia, if I am not mistaken, mentioned that previously we were fulfilling everything. It was the case. Andrii Motovylovets and other people were doing their best, and we were, everyone was trying to dismantle that, but we were voting in favor of it. Sometimes it was at the very last minute, but all the laws were, all the commitments were fulfilled in time. But in 2025, there were some changes. Of course, the USA elected a new president. Secondly, we are grateful, quote unquote, to the European Commission because they, showed a lot of lenience. They forgave Ukraine for the unmet deadlines, and that was a mistake. Same goes for the IMF, the World Bank. I think that the worst role was played by the European Commission. They had a very weak position. I'm really sorry for being very forthright, but anyway, who am I to teach the European Commission? But they showed something like this. You can do whatever you want to. There will be no punishment for the unmet deadlines. If Stefanishina is running and saying that we have to reform ARMA a little bit, it means that Stefanishina is a traitor and that it's not an international requirement, and the European Commission agrees. And when the USA, let's put it, they became not really interested in the development of democracy, we started just failing on the deadlines. I will set you a very simple example. For example, as of now, it's the 31st July. As for IMF, BEP and Lozovay and the strengths and capacity of the Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office is not also here. To draft laws were just withdrawn. And, it just required 15 minutes to register them. Now there are no draft laws like that, but can you tell me who is the person that cannot do that? It is very easy. The Ministry of Finance can do that. They can just ask a member of parliament to register it. So it could have been done through the Cabinet of Ministers. Okay, second point is all of us know that on the 22nd of June this year, there was a internal investigation of the government about the failure regarding the Ukraine facility plan. And, the person responsible for that failure was appointed the prime minister. But again, the third point.
Law on vocational education. I know this very well. Why? Because my wife is related to this sector. There are no problems at all in order to vote for this law. Why didn't we vote for it? Because on 1 week when we had to do it, we had to fire Shmyhal, had to appoint new Shmyhal. And then in July, there were voices. We could just in a couple of seconds vote for this law. But no, we decided to make the law 12,414 about Sabu and Nabu and Sapo. Law on railway. Nobody even submitted it. And again, submitted, but we found that we wanted to cheat our partners. Sorry for saying that. could have come and I could have said, okay, parliament is not working, we have political crisis, we cannot agree. Here's Yulia Tymoshenko, she is putting the obstacle, and maybe that would be an excuse. But first of all, as we saw on the law on Nabu and Sapo, when Yermak and Yulia Tymoshenko last year we worked with Andrii, whom I truly consider that he is my good friend, even though I offend him a lot. We worked as a clock. This chart was all green. And this again has one explanation. President. It all ends up on president, where Marchenko, Svirdenko, and even our friend Sobolev are silent. They're afraid to say even one word. And any international requirement, they perceive it as if you are a bad negotiator. Our international partners demonstrated that you can do whatever you want to, even you can shoot into the candidate of the Bureau of Economic Security. At the end, we came to the point where we found out that we are having to pay the fine for the mistake. What do I expect? I'm not expecting any changes. If certain people expect that things will change after this discussion, let's be honest. We solved the problems. Will there be any changes? No. It will not there. Bureau of Economic Security is an example. So, do you think there will be the will there be any changes if European Commission and IMF take other position? If they don't, then our problem will scale up. Let's be honest. We see that nobody is even trying to submit the law. This is not the political decision. We have to make on Ukraine facility. There is no political will. Maybe about, we don't even have voices. We didn't even want to verify. They are there, of course. But as our partners, for some reason, mistakenly, they think that to praise us and not ask us about homework that we were supposed to do and we receive the money for. This is their strategy. Then we warned you. This is the result. If IMF and other partners finally will start to act like adults. I'm sorry. I don't like this example with the children. So we cannot ask children, don't play PlayStation and drink Coca-Cola, but read books, encyclopedias. This is a good dialogue. But within the framework of the funds for reform, you won't believe me that everything will return back to normal. I would like to, for the representatives of our government to say this. They are silent. Why they're silent? Because who will tell that to president he'll be fired tomorrow? Actually, you can talk to some of those who already have been in those shoes. So I will finish up. I'm not believing in the internal pattern, I'm sure. Again, Andrew, together with other guys, are doing a wonderful work. Sometimes the law on ARMA was adopted despite the decision at the office of president, because Andrii, me, and Anastasia Radina, we changed the votes. If this paradigm goes to what was in 2024, there is schedule. Andrew and I, we have it. We argue a lot. And then Tatarov or others will try to put sticks in our wheel, but decision is made, super. If there will be G7 that will be not giving any just like last time, I saw how it was on Bureau of Economic Security and Customs. If it's not going to happen, we will have another story of the 22nd of July, and it will happen very fast. And then how will street and partners will respond to, I don't know, they probably won't be quite loyal. Okay, and the last speech. Okay, after political debate, let us all go home calmly and quiet and not run somewhere. But let's go back to the long-term perspective. Do you agree that, Ivan, that your Euro integration direction has been harmed and damaged? Or we can still correct the situation. Do you agree with the picture that Yaroslav mentioned, that you don't anticipate the positive change of the government in the nearest future? And of course, the effect on the European integration will be the relevant as well. I didn't expect that my task will be to calm everyone down. I will say from my part, including the response to certain speeches of experts and MPs. My 3 lessons learned on indicators, on IMF, on facility, Ukraine facility, and 3 lessons learned and what to do. First lesson that I hope that all have to learn from this, that any rollback on anti-corruption, this is unacceptable for our Western partners, for our donors. Situation when more than a half of our budget is international financial assistance. Any Western politician in USA, in Japan, in Europe, all donors who are providing assistance to us, they will be afraid to be accused in their position that they're giving money to the country which does not comply with requirements on anti-corruption. So it brought a horrible response from international partners, European partners. I am in communication with some representatives of experts from very friendly countries who always promote Ukrainian accession to EU. I have received a message that this is detrimental. This is just killing to the movement, and this is quite understandable. And I hope that this will be clear and understanding that all these indicators are important and anti-corruption is important for all our partners. Lesson number 2. I hope, this is my opinion, I was very sad to understand last week that not many people, some people who take high positions in the state, they think that if exception to EU is in 5 or 10 years, so this is a very long-term perspective, and we should not take it into account for the sake of personal short-term perspectives, because this is the strategic thing that we need to work towards now in order for this to happen in 5 and 10 years, because this is one thing. When we talk about financial assistance to the country which is somewhere on the side of EU, the other thing it's the country that is entering EU and will be the member of EU. This is a totally different paradigm. When we talk about future budget for EU, because facility is till 2027, it's within the current framework of budget of EU. So right now, European Commission presented a proposal for the next budget of EU. I actually even thought we would discuss this issue, but last week it all went to waste. But it's a huge issue. What will we as a country do after 2028, after facility? But it will depend on how well we are moving towards EU or we're not moving. So this is a lesson that I have taken for myself. So right now, for some people, high officials, we have to explain. I thought it was quite clear. I think this lesson is learned, but I'm not sure quite. Third lesson is this is what many have mentioned. Ivan has mentioned it's the key word. All European integration has this word. It's about trust. Trust, this is very hard to conquer, very easy to lose. But European integration, entrance of the country into the club, this is about trust. Trust from the members to the new member. Is this candidate worthy to be accepted as the country member or not? Why there are these criteria, indicators, benchmarkers, clusters, chapters, Copenhagen requirements, European Commission. We have a European Commission which is very complimentary towards Ukraine. Let's call it the way it is. They are just pulling us to European Union as much as they can. But the task of European Commission is to form objective indicators in order to persuade other countries' members that here Ukraine has indicators and it is worthy to be accepted. If we're not doing it and if we are rolling back, then what can we count on? And this is where we are right now. What to do? We have to, as soon as possible, we need to rebuild the trust. What to do? The list is quite obvious. Legislation, appointment of a Bureau of Economic Security, customs, judges of anti-constitution, of the anti-corruption court, VAX, many things, and they're almost ready. Competitions have been held, candidates were selected, competition has to launch. Yeah, all these things are quite important. After this story that happened now I'm afraid it's an objective reality. I think European Commission will be more demanding towards us. And for some things they closed eyes before, now they will not. Now they will be more serious towards us and they will treat differently towards what is our progress and how we fulfill our commitments. We can explain who to who, Verkhovna Rada, Cabinet of Ministers, ministries. No, Ukraine fails totally in general. And I hope that we will have lessons learned from this story. And I think we need to move towards rebuilding the trust because at stake is the whole country. At the front, the pensions, payments, salaries, the military, and our historical perspectives. So what country our children will live in the future. All will depend on that. If we will maintain the trust of our partners, European partners, if we'll be able to get out of this situation and to turn it into a positive agenda. Thank you, Dmytro, for this focus on trust. It's a very correct one. Thank you so much to all of our panelists for participation. And I thank you all who listened to us online. Now we will have delicious things and a coffee break, and you can continue the discussion during the coffee break. And then in a hour you can go to the discussion in another hall. Thanks to all online participants. This was a very interesting discussion. Discussion was very good and fruitful. It allowed us to show different opinions to this situation, and it gave us a deep understanding of those problems that we have. And I thank our colleagues who prepared presentation, colleagues from partnership organizations. Thank you very much. Have a safe evening and goodbye.